Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. My name is Imogen Bogle and I am one of the presenters here on the Everything Electric Show and the Fully Charged Show. And today we are talking about the enormous untapped potential of rooftop solar with a wonderful woman called Jo Parker Swift. Now, whenever we talk about solar here on the Fully Charged Show or the Everything Electric Show, someone invariably, and very rightly so, puts in the comments something along the lines of, why isn't every rooftop here in the UK covered with solar? And it is a really, really valid question. There are some 2 million industrial or non-domestic buildings here in the UK. So think factories, warehouses, supermarkets, what have you. And the capacity on the rooftops of those 2 million non-domestic buildings equates to roughly 128 gigawatts if they were all covered with solar. Now, to put that into perspective, that could power 30 million homes. And the UK Solar Task Force is currently on a mission to deploy 50 gigawatts of solar by 2030. So 128 gigawatts, that is absolutely enormous. And yet, at present, just 11 gigawatts of capacity is currently being used. So in this podcast, we wanted to see who is addressing this challenge, who has a solution, and what are the barriers that still remain in the way. So we're going to get into all of that with the wonderful Jo Parker Swift, who works for a company called Solarverse. But first, a very, very quick advert break. Try Everything Electric at our exhibitions in Australia, Canada, and the UK. Next up, London. Jo, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. This is really exciting, not least because I think it's safe to say that we come across a lot of men within this industry. We come across fewer female CEOs. So we are particularly lucky on not just for the fact that you're doing some incredible things, but also that you're sort of somewhat bucking the trend, which we're very grateful to see. But I wonder if you could kind of kick us off with describing who exactly Solarverse is, and what is exactly the problem that you're trying to solve. And also, have I pronounced the name correctly?
Yeah, it's Solarverse. I wish some days I wish I'd called the business something else because people often struggle with the name. We have Solarverse. We are specialists in lightweight solar technology. So we are tackling the built environment. We're really focused on the built environment and decarbonising the built environment. And we're focused on providing solutions for the buildings that you can't put regular solar on. So that's large commercial buildings that has weight issues. And also in the domestic sector, we're developing a product that stands on the ground rather than going on people's roofs.
And I think that's the thing that, whenever we put a video out on the Fully Charged Show or Everything Electric Show, there are invariably someone comments something along the lines of, there are so many rooftops in the UK, if only we could deploy lots of solar. And I don't think there's necessarily been quite the understanding that actually many commercial buildings have been limited by the weight that goes on the roof and therefore how suitable they are for traditional solar or not. So how have you combated that problem?
Yeah, so it's probably helpful if I sort of say the journey, how we started, and then you'll have an understanding of how that came about, how we came up with the solution and combated that. So this business is actually the third business that I founded, and I was sort of looking for my next idea, and I was worried about energy for my own home. I was worried about energy security, and I was looking out into the garden and I saw these laurel bushes, and I realized, because I was realizing there wasn't enough space on the roof to generate the power that my home needed. So I looked at these laurel bushes. I went out and I measured all the leaves, counted them all, realized it's a huge surface area. So my idea originally was to invent a solar tree. That's where it started. So I went on a journey discovering all this lightweight thin film technology and to create leaves in a tree. That was where it started. And that idea has turned into this Solarverse arc. I don't know if you can see that with the light.
Yes. So for those
Might see that on the website.
Yes, I was just going to say, for those who are listening and not watching and listening, I would describe that as quite a beautiful sort of structural sculpture.
Yeah. So it didn't work out to create leaves, although that might be something you can do further in the future. But leaves are too expensive with too many junction boxes and things. So it's turned into a sculptural shape. But I was working my home's in Kent. I was working with some scientists in Cambridge. And I was driving back over the Dartford crossing and I saw huge warehouses. As I was driving over Dartford Crossing, couldn't understand why they didn't have solar on.
Mm-hmm.
Asked a few questions and realized it was weight limitations. The larger buildings have weight limitations. And I was already playing with these very lightweight
Mm.
solar technologies. And so I realized there was a huge market opportunity for lightweight solar on commercial buildings. So that's where we started. I'd already done quite a lot of research into lightweight solar tech. But then we had the challenge of, okay, how do we inform people about this? How do we let them know? And how do we attach it to the roof and make this happen?
Mm. So the first thing that popped into my mind when I had a look at your solution is that there isn't the glass. Um, and therefore I was like, what does this mean from a durability perspective? Have there been any compromises that you've had to make in order to get that lightweighting?
There's a really interesting question about the durability because these products have been around actually for quite a long time.
Mm.
Sort of around 2006 to 8, there was a big kind of excitement about them, but they didn't have the durability. They didn't have the length of life. But now, over time, the companies that are creating these products, they have developed, they've got the encapsulation right, and they now have warranties in line with conventional solar. So they now have sort of 24-year warranties. So the durability is there. And some, you could argue, they are more durable in some ways because they don't have glass on them.
Mm.
Or in heavy hail storm, for example, that won't damage them, it won't break them.
Ah, of course. How about cleaning? Are they as easy to clean as glass?
Yes, they have self-cleaning properties on the top, and they just need to be washed off once a year as the maintenance program for them.
So, I mean, what's not to love, really? But then I suppose, presumably, and this sounds like I'm really playing devil's advocate. I'm not at all. I'm just like, is this almost, is it almost too good to be true? Um, Efficiency wise, I'm guessing that there must be some trade off there in that, what's the sort of industry average? I guess 24% efficient. How does it compare to the industry?
Yeah, I mean, 24% is quite high. It's early 20s is the sort of average. And these lightweight technologies tend to be between 19 and 22% efficiency. So it has the same, a lot of the products have the same underlying technology, which is
Mm.
crystalline silicon. But it just doesn't have the glass and the metal encapsulation. So it does have a much lower carbon footprint in that regard. But, I can tell you're looking for a catch, and there is a catch. And the catch is that it is more expensive because
Mm.
it's relatively new technology. It's more expensive to purchase the lightweight soda, and it's also more expensive to put it on a roof. It's a really technical thing actually to put it on a roof, and that's where a lot of our IP and knowledge and specialist knowledge comes in. Is how do you fix this to roofs? It is quite a complex process. In order to do that, it takes longer. There's a lot of R&D involved. So that's the catch. It's a
Mm.
hassle to do it. And that's why you're not seeing it everywhere yet.
So why is it tricky to attach to roofs?
Well, you've got something that is effectively just like a board,
Mm.
uh, and some of them are more flexible than others,
Mhm.
which brings its own challenges because then you have windage, and certain products are more suited to different situations and different roofs. But you have, corrugated roofs, you
Mm.
have membrane roofs, lots of different roof types, and all of the fixing methods out there are all geared towards conventional solar with a hard metal and glass that you can put clamps on.
Mhm.
So we can't do that. So we, specialize in knowing a lot of the roofs we glue to the roof with industrial glues, which is a new phenomenon for people to understand that glues can be strong enough and that we can use those. And then there's other specialist methods for different roof types as well, which I won't go into too much because that's our IP.
And I also, whenever I speak to people who have started businesses, I always imagine this process of, you've driven past on the Dartford Dartford bypass, Dartford Bridge, and you look at all these rooftops and think, "What an opportunity."
Mm.
And then as you delve into it, you're like,
It was like, "Oh, so that's why it's a real hassle."
but then I suppose the alternative, it is a hassle and it is expensive, but compared to the alternative, which is not a viable option for commercial build, and therefore, in the long run, it's still cheaper because you can
Yeah.
still save on your electricity bills.
Yeah. And I should point out that that's where Solidus is positioning ourselves, is that we're really clear to say that we are not competing with conventional solar. If
Mm.
your roof can take the weight of the normal solar, that's what you should go and do.
Yeah.
We wouldn't even quote for somebody if their roof can take conventional solar, because we know we can't compete. However, where we're positioning ourselves is keeping this new technology really, really straightforward for customers. It can be a bit overwhelming and confusing solar anyway, if it's not your core business. So we take the hassle out of it. We take the hassle onto us,
Mm.
and we keep everything really straightforward for our customers.
And I think, you were like, caveat, it is a hassle and we'll take on that
Yeah.
hassle. But clearly it hasn't put off some pretty major customers that you have. And you've been involved in some incredibly exciting projects. I wonder if you could take us through some of those.
So I was really thrilled. I got to do a shout out to a couple of my first customers. Well, one main one's Julia Chapman, who's now been promoted to CEO at Northampton Saints Rugby Club. And following our installation, they also won the Premiership. I'll just say that. So yeah, that was a great installation to do that on the rugby club. Was one of the first ones, because that was quite helpful for a sort of showcase.
Mm.
And then that led on to the stadium in the same town, which is the cricket club. So the Northampton County Cricket Club, we also installed on there. But the real game changer really has been in the last year. We won a contract with Farnborough Airport, which ironically, I was actually on the Fully Charged show, and I think 2022.
Mhm.
And I was looking across at these beautiful curves, iconic roofs, and I just thought, I want to install on those. They're perfect. They'd be like the perfect showcase for our product. And through a bizarre course of events, we now have done that. And it's a beautiful installation that we're really proud of. It's like having a shop on Bond Street, the equivalent in solar world. So it's a really, really iconic showcase for what we can do.
Yeah. And for anyone who isn't familiar with Farnborough Airfield, A, you should be, because it is home to Everything Electric Live, and you should come along to one of our shows. But B, it has these, exactly as you described, these incredibly curved roofs, which I imagine, total challenge to install. And also, you've got all those private jets coming in who'll be able to see those rooftops and think,
Yes.
what's that about then?
Yeah, no, it has been great, and we've been able to take other companies, other airports there to see what we can do. But I should say that the main driver for the airport was actually reducing their carbon footprint. There's a huge pressure on airports to decarbonize, and that was the main driver. But Farnborough Airport is also going to be saving a lot of money on their energy bills. They'll save about £14 million on their energy bills over the course of the lifetime of the solar. So it's definitely worth doing. But their main driver was the sustainability and the carbon footprint, because it doesn't have any glass or metal. It has a lower carbon footprint. So I think that's going to save about 6,000 tons of carbon.
And I suppose actually that's something that I'd not stopped to think about, that broader supply chain piece, that if you're shipping these panels from across the world, you're not shipping glass, which is extremely heavy, takes up a lot of room. So the end-to-end supply chain and global footprint must be that much more palatable as well.
Yes, yeah. And actually, the Solibus Arc that we are creating, that is made out of organic solar. So I'm so excited about that product, because it doesn't have any deep mining, no rare earth materials in it. You can recycle it at the end of its life. in theory, you could put that technology on every roof in the world, and the ingredients to make it will never run out. So it is more expensive, which is why we launched as a luxury product. But that organic solar is really world saving. It's great.
So I have to admit, this wasn't a term I'd heard of until really, really recently. And my husband came back from work and he was like, "Do you know any organic solar companies?" And I was like, "Do you know, there is one that I may be speaking to on Tuesday." But I wonder if we could take a step back for a moment and if you could describe in super, super simple terms what organic solar actually means.
Yeah, well, it's made out of carbons. So in theory, you could get the ingredients from plants. It's not made in that way at the moment, but in theory, you could do that in the future. But yeah, it's just made from carbons. I don't know the specific ingredients of it because we're not party to that information, but I do know that usually conventional solar will take a number of years to pay back the carbon footprint to make it, but organic solar only takes 12 weeks. So
Wow.
when we go to fully market the Solidus Arc, it'll be a big push about having this amazing, clean, sustainable product in your home.
And I think the other thing that's really important to note is that these, albeit luxury, organic solar structures that you can put in your garden, you can pick up and take with you should you move home as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a hassle to put solar on your roof. You've got to get scaffolding and the cost of scaffolding around all of that. You don't have to do that with this. And yeah, it's that decision. Or what if I move home? If you move home, just take it with you.
God, I have to say, in my old house, when I think we needed a few tiles replacing, and the cost of that was reasonably straightforward. The cost of the scaffolding,
it's the scaffolding. It's expensive.
oh God! And every time I'd look out and think, Anyway, but leaky roof or paved scaffolding. What's the worst outcome? Okay, so one of the things that I discovered in researching for this podcast is that the UK has a rather unfortunate accolade of having some of the most expensive industrial electricity in the world. And I think, I'm lifting this from articles that you've quoted, but 4 times the cost of industrial electricity in the US, double that of many, many other countries, particularly in Europe. And obviously, the UK government is on a campaign to deliver clean power by 2030. But I can't help but think, well, are businesses being adequately supported to make that transition? What kind of help is available, if any, to help customers transition to, have lightweight solar, like the world of Solarverse on their roofs as well?
Yeah, I do think, excuse me, there could be more of a push and more of an encouragement for commercial solar. Not just lightweight solar technology. I mean, lightweight solar technology is really it's for us now to really get out there and let people know that this exists. And thank you for inviting me on this show because that's going to help that message. But I do think there could be more encouragement on rooftop solar. We do have enough roofs to power, sort of half our UK electricity. It should be encouraged. It is a little bit confusing and overwhelming if it's not your core business. So some communication and encouragement around that. There is a lot of finance out there for this. So I think that people are a little bit, they want to have the same relationship with their electricity that they've always had. They want to pay monthly. They don't want to pay thousands of pounds, or in the case of big warehouses, millions of pounds up front. But they don't actually need to do that because there's so much finance out there. Obviously, you don't save as much with the finance over the lifetime of the product, but you still do make hugely significant savings. And so you don't have to have a big upfront payment, and you can still pay monthly and get instant savings and decarbonize your building. And I think there needs to be more communication and encouragement around that.
I suppose one of the challenges as well is that many of these warehouses and industrial properties, they're not owned by the businesses who are using them. There is a landlord somewhere. And when you have that that upfront capital cost, what's the incentive for that landlord aside from reducing their overall carbon footprint? Has that been your experience, and is that a challenge that you have to face within?
Yeah, I don't know if you've had other solar companies on here, conventional solar, but that is one of the big barriers, is this mismatch between the landlord and the tenant timescale.
Mm.
And there's often a kind of roadmap that, so when are the tenants changing? And we'll put the solar on a roof when the tenants change over, but that could be like 5 years or more. So I think, again, there could be a bit more of a marriage of minds between tenants and landlords so that everyone can benefit from it. But there's a bit of a stick coming, because people need to have the right rating for the buildings in terms of sustainability. And if they haven't done that in time, in a few years, then they stand a risk of having stranded assets and not being able to rent their buildings out. So there is a stick coming to encourage people to do this.
Mm. What's the sort of, because I can imagine that with many of your customers and potential customers, you have to take them on a bit of a journey to get them there and to kind of anticipate where some of these worry beads and concerns exist. How do you what's the biggest barrier that you experience, and how do you get them over that sort of perceived hump and sort of hold their hand through that process?
Yes. So there's a lot of questions around how do you fix this to the roof, and roof warranty questions. And there's a big conversation in engineers, R&D, testing. There's a big journey around that. It has helped having the installations in place that people can go and see now. I can share with you that we are doing our first installation for Tesco. So
Oh,
that is really super exciting, because Tesco actually uses 1% of the UK's electricity.
no.
That's so crazy. They are way bigger than any other supermarket chain. But there's a fantastic new head of energy there, Bianca, who's just very, very cool. She is on a mission to decarbonize Tesco and get as much renewable energy there. So Tesco came out, Bianca and her colleagues came out to Farnborough Airport, actually.
Mhm.
So we took them on that journey, took them out to the airport to see how we'd fixed it to the roof so that they could really understand it. They were blown away by it. Like, wow, we didn't realize this was possible. Okay,
Mm.
let's do a pilot. Let's get on with this. So we're currently installing our first pilot for Tesco. So that's super exciting.
That is absolutely unbelievable. And especially when, we often talk about things like microgrids and that kind of thing. And you think Tesco's take up huge amounts of spaces within cities, but also just if you were to add up all of the possible surface area that they have on their rooftops across the UK, the potential that they could have not just to power their own buildings, but maybe sort of surrounding chargers or households, or, even if they were storing that and helping with local fuel poverty, for example, the potential impact is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. You were talking about barriers earlier. One of the frustrating barriers for us is that some of these buildings are so big, they often have a large amount of surplus energy. So there are many buildings we might be able to put sort of 5 or 6 megawatts on, but they can only use 1 or 2 megawatts in the building. And
Wow.
because the price you get for selling back to the grid, remember, our product's more expensive, and the price you get for selling back to the grid isn't very good. So it doesn't make sense to sell it back to the grid. So we're having to be really inventive and studying the market and understanding how best we can use this energy. You're right, in the surrounding community, exploring batteries and exploring energy trading.
That is really cool. And I think, I bang on about this all the time. But I feel like if you look at these technologies and just think of them as a like for like replacement with what's gone before, fine, it's a new technology and it's kind of interesting. But if you can kind of open Pandora's box to see how it could fundamentally change how we consume energy and support communities and decarbonize society as a whole, that's when it becomes so much more exciting. And those sort of what if scenarios are just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
So we're going to be watching this.
And is one of our target markets, Northampton County Cricket Club. We have surplus energy on there that we're selling to a community shop. There's got a lot of fridges and refrigerators in it. So that's sort of just a little practice pilot, but that sort of thing, sports stadiums could, because they have a lot of down days where they don't have much energy, so that energy could then be used for the local communities.
So we filmed an episode in a church in Bristol. They were looking at infrared heating in a sort of halo-like light fitting, and the priest there was saying, all churches, pretty much most churches are east-west facing, and they have a large roof, which is so ripe for solar. Maybe we need to connect the dots there as well, because again, huge amount of roof space, huge amount of opportunity to support surrounding communities as well.
Yeah, agreed.
So in light of all of that, if you could have just one thing for 2025 that would just make your life that much easier, and that would make all of these conversations with customers that much easier, what would you ask for?
Actually, we're having amazing conversations with customers, and we have a lot of interest. The one thing that would make my life easier as a CEO is actually investment to scale our team. We need more engineers. We need to be designing many more roofs and whatnot. So that's probably the main thing that would help. I mean, all entrepreneurs are all constantly on this journey, and you're constantly growing and things like that. But as a female trying to get investment, everybody knows it's a lot harder. So that one thing would help. But in terms of the political environment, because our products are more expensive, perhaps a feed-in tariff to sort of even out a bit, because people hear it's more expensive. Sometimes that's like, ooh, I'm not sure. We have to take some convincing around, but you're still going to save masses on your energy bill. It's just more expensive compared to conventional solar.
That's really interesting. And that's sort of forcing people to kind of have that long-term view of their savings as well. So I do want to ask you about your experience of being a female CEO, because I've got to say, we find it very, very interesting on the Fully Charged show, because it's not to say that there aren't loads and loads of female CEOs. There certainly are a few, but we come across them less frequently. I think the other thing that we find is that there is less of a willingness of women in the clean energy industry to describe themselves as experts, which is criminal, because so often we're like, you are absolutely the experts, and we would love you to speak about XYZ subject. But I wonder what your experience has been like, and what led you to this industry in the first place.
The experience actually in this sector has been really fun. It's been really great, and people embrace female CEOs in the sustainability sector. It is quite a diverse sector. Just by its nature, it's disruptive. And so, there's lots of female leaders in this area. So I haven't found that an issue at all. This is my third business, so founding a business is not something new to me. And previously, my first two businesses sort of in the healthcare industry, and I could have done another healthcare business, but you only live once. And I thought, if you do the same thing you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. So let's try something different. And I did do environmental science at university. So I'm sort of going back to my roots with this one, and really passionate about it.
Do you know, it's so true. I think you're absolutely right. Electric vehicles, clean energy industry by its nature is disruptive, as you say. And we certainly find at our live shows as well that there is this willingness to collaborate and support each other within the industry. And I think that's really wonderful, and it's really unique. And even competition is sort of slightly cooperative competition and quite friendly. But yeah,
you can't make enemies in this sector at all, because it's relatively niche and small, and everybody knows everybody. So you have to be helpful to everyone, and all companies are aware of that, big and small. So everybody does collaborate.
And also, everyone's on the same mission. And actually, if you believe in that mission, you should want everyone to be successful. with some ever so slightly more successful than others, obviously. But you did mention there that investment is a little bit more challenging, and that is something that we see, in various statistics, that people are more likely to receive investment from someone who looks like themselves, and often those investment communities can be made of a panel of males.
Mhm.
How do you combat that particular scenario?
Well, I haven't really got to the bottom of this yet. So, I hear the statistics. So somewhere 1% of VC money, something like, I don't know, it's very low for to be investing in females. But most of my high net worth investors, a couple of females, and I just appreciate my high net worth, all our investors so much. I really feel such a sense of responsibility. They believe in us. They've trusted us with their money, so we work incredibly hard. We're always talking about this to the team. That's fine, but it's more now the scale up funding. That sort of investment has been amazing. It's the problem. It comes when I don't get to speak to a person. So it through forms and committees, and when they haven't got to meet me and feel the fire in my belly, I suppose that's a barrier that's difficult to get through when you're just a name on a form and you're talked about in a committee. That don't know how to get past. That's really tough.
Yeah, because it's fascinating because, there can be many, many brilliant ideas and important ideas, but actually to make them reality and to make them successful, it needs the right person and the right leader with the right team and the right skills, etc., to deliver it. And how on earth can you convey that without
I
having
can
that
get that
face-to-face
across. Yeah.
conversation?
I
Yeah.
look forward to being the other side of the table on the investment committees. I might change a few things.
Yeah. I think that'd be really fun. And I think we should also start the campaign for you to be the newest dragon in Dragon's Den, perhaps. So as you've mentioned, this is your third business. You have a tremendous amount of experience, not least in working in different fields and different sectors, but of course with different types of people and at different levels of seniority as well. And I wonder, as this will be coming out around International Women's Day,
Mm-hmm.
I do want to ask the question, what do you think male colleagues could be doing to better support women within the clean energy industry, the electrification industry more broadly? And I suppose what more can be done to retain women in the sector and encourage them to join it in the first place?
Okay, great questions. Thank you. I do think this is something that I've always sort of steered away from previously when people ask me about this, because I took this whole thing out of the equation of my career quite early on. I started my first business when I was 23, where I
Wow.
could see women. I was working for a pharmaceutical company at the time, and I could see the progression for women was going to be really difficult. It was going to be a really hard road. So I set my own business up then. So I just literally removed this whole thing from my career at that point. And so I do sort of want to help people, other females, with this. I think there's a lot that we can do for ourselves. Firstly, if you get to the position where you're recruiting, make sure you're recruiting the right males that are going to support you. Really put a lot into that recruitment process and make sure that you're going to get a lot of support. Take time to do that. And then also, I do think that we can do a lot for ourselves in terms of our own behavior, actually. Sometimes at the moment, I get to speak to very senior people in large organizations very, very quickly. And most of them are really very, very intelligent. That's how they've got there, and everything's all very, very straightforward. Occasionally, you might come across a dynamic where you feel yourself getting a bit overpowered, and it's very easy as a woman to go into that slightly subservient role, which sort of ingrained in us in our upbringing somehow, for a lot of us anyway. And so I've really trained myself over the years to realize when that's happening and to stop that happening, and realizing that actually I can do that. I don't mean being aggressive, but I do mean just being assertive and being myself. I just suddenly think, Joe, stop going into the submissive thing. Be yourself. Be yourself. You're confident. You know this stuff. Just be yourself and don't do that. And I just stopped myself going into that role. And I do think, yeah, we could do a lot for ourselves to help change this dynamic.
That is such a good answer. And I have to say, it reminds me of playing chess with my husband. So, and I promise you this is relevant because I learned how to play chess during lockdown. He'd played for many years. So, since lockdown and now, it has been a mission to try and be a more equal competitor.
Yeah.
And I notice sometimes when, he's made a couple of good early moves that it forces me to play defensively. And I always have to have a moment to myself say, no, well, you need to be a bit defensive in some areas of this game of chess, but actually don't let it take away from your initial strategy that you had set in your mind. And it needs that sort of defensive play needs to be balanced by that sort of forthright play as well. And I think about that a lot when we play chess. and now I can see it's
You have that moment where you have to stop yourself and say, what are you doing? Just stop behaving like that. Sort yourself out.
and suddenly, my queen's backed in a corner and I didn't want it that way. So, yeah. No, I think that's wonderful advice. And I think, I've worked in many male-dominated environments as well. And I think women, well, actually not just women, but anyone who is a good listener as well, has the superpower to listen to what's going on around them and reflect it back in a really succinct way. And I feel like that's something that in those moments when you can take it in, take a step back and reflect back, that has a gentle way of disarming as well. So before we come to a close, what should I have asked you today, do you think?
What should you have asked me? Well, I think you've done pretty well. You've looked at all the barriers, all the sales, our journey ahead for the future, I suppose.
Yes.
Our journey ahead for the future is quite ambitious in that, we could do quite well just focusing in the UK market, but we do tend to go international. We've very recently set up an office in Dubai and to tackle the UAE market. I recognise there's certainly a market there for the Solidus Arc, and there are a lot of roofs there as well. And we do plan to go into the US. One of your statistics there was that our electricity is a lot more expensive than the US, but the US is very much, state by state in terms of the electricity prices. We're very targeted on regions where they've got high electricity so there are certain countries in Europe, certain states in the US. The UAE is slightly different because that market's not pulled by electricity prices, actually. The market is pulled by trying to get as much solar on site as possible so that they can use their oil for exporting. So there's a different market there. So that's not necessarily competing against the electricity prices, but other countries, we have to target places where they've got high electricity prices.
I suppose a willingness for people to adopt clean technologies, that's obviously a super positive thing, but for the economic argument to totally make sense and unearth additional opportunities, I think that's tremendously exciting. And it's awesome to see what you're doing to make that possible. So thank you so much for giving up your morning to join us on the podcast. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Okay. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. I really, really enjoyed talking to Jo. And actually, when we clicked stop recording, we began talking about the role of women in STEM. And we're having this conversation very, very close to International Women's Day. And I think that is something that I would so love for our listeners to take away from this, that actually there are so many careers and opportunities available in the world of clean energy and electrification, not least for women. And, how cool is it to be able to do something super positive for the world whilst shaping and crafting the world around us? That's my 2 cents. Anyway, before you go, if you could do us one teeny tiny favour and like, comment or subscribe or all of the above, or come to one of our live shows or tell a friend or all of those sorts of bits and bobs, we would so appreciate it. It really does help to ensure that we can keep on sharing the cool and important stuff in this clean energy transition. But that's it. If you have been, thank you for listening and watching.